Okay, now we're recording. Let me get the intro up. Wade Lightheart is I don't like that. Here we go. Wade Lightheart is an advisor to the American Anti-Cancer Institute, certified sports nutritionist, a 3-time all-natural national bodybuilding champion, former Mr. Universe competitor, and author of the book Staying Alive in a Toxic World. He's been in the health industry for over 25 years and coached thousands of clients worldwide. He's also a president and co-founder of Bioptimizers, the supplement company dedicated to discovering, presenting, and sharing strategies backed by cutting-edge research that leads to healthy, high performance. He's also one of my friends and one of the people in this industry that I not only have tremendous respect for, but enjoy immensely. Wade Lightheart, welcome to the Biohacking Secrets Show.
Great to be here, man. It seems like we were just hanging out the other day in Finland at the Biohacker Summit, and I was like, wait a second, that was like 6 months ago. How did that happen?
Yes, I think that I'm starting to experience the theory from quantum physics that as I get older, time seems to move a lot faster. I remember when I was a kid, like a month in school seemed to take forever. Now it's like 6 months passes in the blink of an eye.
Except during lockdown.
Yeah, except during lockdown when every day feels
starts to slow again.
Every day feels like it's 72 hours. I saw a hilarious little bit from
totally
Jimmy Kimmel, and he was like, can we all agree to cut the days down to like 14 hours? You know, you're awake for 7, you sleep for 7. He goes, it would be much more tolerable, this whole situation. So we're diving into some of the science and benefits of magnesium. Now, a lot of the listeners are probably familiar. They know that magnesium is one of the biggest deficiencies. 60 to 80% of people are not getting enough. But you have a personal story with this mineral and some of the things that it's done for you that kind of led us to this conversation. Maybe you could take us back 2 years and catch the listeners up to speed.
Yeah, I'd love to do it. And, you know, I think there's an illusion out there, and I want to put a caveat here. There's an illusion out here that as a biohacker that we're always in perfect condition and we're always at our optimal health. Mm-hmm. And typically, I would say your average biohacker or that type of person is someone who expects more out of them, who sets a higher standard, a higher performance parameters from the ordinary person. And almost every one of us likes to push the limits, whether it's physically and mentally or business-wide. We're just that kind of hard wiring. And I'm one of those guys. You're one of those guys. Most of our listeners listening are one of those people. And what happens is I equate us like the Formula One cars. Yes, you can go around the track faster and you can handle the turns better, but guess what? You need to pull in the pits a lot more, and you are not driving that car for fuel mileage. Okay. You're driving that car for performance. Mm-hmm. And inadvertently, you're going to find performance flaws at the high end where you could carry on a normal life and run maybe your normal job or your normal business. But many of us have 2 or 3 jobs, 2 or 3 businesses. A lot of us are on the road a lot and putting out at a high level and demanding that of ourselves. And I was in that case. And I was really, I was in the 16-hour-a-day work program and combined with traveling, and I was working with a new business and growing another one and then maintaining another one while in a relationship and living in a foreign country and going through all that sort of stuff. And the combined level of stress that was building up was really burning my fuel tank. And a lot of people can relate to this, is that you're like, okay, I'm getting older. And I haven't gone down the hormone replacement therapy or SARMs or some of those things. I'm not against those things. I'm like, I want to keep my powder dry as maybe I get aged before I go down those roads. I want to exhaust every single nutrient component in my life, every single hack that I can in my life before I get into the exogenous stuff. Because once you step over there, you're on that pathway forever. And I understand that. So, long story short, I'm in the total full-blown tilt for about 3 years, nonstop, that kind of ferocious pace. And, I can remember at a point where I had decided that I would take 3 hours off to watch an NFL football game on Sunday. And by halftime, I was feeling guilty because I felt like I wasn't being on top of things. It was just crazy. But you get into these, you know, it's like, okay, wait, something's wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, I started to notice I became very sensitive to caffeine, not just in coffee, but in tea and anything else. Like all of a sudden, what used to be kind of a mild mental nootropic or stimulant, the first sign of it, and I would get anxious, I would get angry. I was waking up tired. And even though I was in pretty good physical condition, actually, I guess most people call it really good condition, I wasn't feeling and operating at my best. And I started to make poor decisions mentally that were affecting my business and affecting my personal life. So long story short, I was like, oh, maybe I just got to cut the caffeine. Maybe I've just overdone it. And so I did that, but I still wasn't getting what I needed to look at. And then what I did is I went and got a SpectraCell test. So a SpectraCell test is a complete, what they do is they draw blood, they spin it out in all these different vials, and they can tell how well you're absorbing your nutrients, vitamins, and minerals, as well as what is the relative levels in your body. So it's much more sophisticated version. I highly recommend it for any biohacker. And
this is their micronutrient test, yes?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. And so what happened is I realized, I'm really deficient in two items, B12 and magnesium. B12, not surprising because I am a plant-based guy and I wasn't getting my B12 injections at that point, and which, you know, I got quickly back onto that once I got to a place where I could access those easily. I was in a location I couldn't access them, and, you know, it was really diminished at that time. But so I started taking magnesium, and I went up in divided doses to 3 grams a day because I knew that it was required for a couple things. One of the things that I noticed on that is I wasn't feeling happy or in my mental focus level. And what I began to realize is that magnesium is a key component in the manufacturing of neurotransmitters. Magnesium is also involved in relaxing muscle tissue. And so I was starting to cramp, particularly in my hamstrings. I never had a cramping problem, even in my bodybuilding days. And I was like, how is this possible? But I was living in a tropical environment. I was sweating a lot more in combination. So there's a number of different things that I was just really not accurately assessing how much mineral loss I was really getting. And of course, magnesium probably being the most key essential mineral that we have. It's required for 350 different metabolic processes. And so the other thing is that nervous system stimulant, magnesium, is also involved in making your nervous system relax as well. And so I was getting all these symptoms, and I started looking at the symptoms and doing them. I was like, holy crap, I'm really magnesium deficient, you know? And I'm, as a biohacker, it's almost embarrassing at that point. You're like, geez, like, how did I get into this situation? So I was like, okay, well, I wonder how much magnesium I need to take. So I knew that if you take too much in a single dosage, what happens is you end up, you brought too much water into the intestinal tract and you get as people call it, disaster pants, right? You just, you know, and this happens a lot of times for heart patients. They go in, they give them some like magnesium supplements, and the next thing you know, they're in the toilet all day long and they feel really embarrassed and stuff like that. So it's because of a high dosage of magnesium, particularly the citrate, which is good for some things as far as making smooth muscle tissue in the intestinal tract if you're a little bit constipated, but too much of it, boom, you set the trigger and away you go, and you're off to the races sitting on the toilet. It's not that comfortable. So what I came up with a strategy is I started dosing up. I started at a 0.5 gram 3 times a day. And then I added a 0.5 gram to the first session, and then the second session and the third session, eventually till I settled on 3 grams a day without any digestive issues, allocated over about an 18-hour window. So like first thing in the morning, middle of the day, and then later in the day. And that was where I could go. Now, the problem was when I was looking at magnesium, there was all different magnesiums, you know, so there was some magnesium that was for your brain, some magnesium that was for your nervous system, some magnesium for your muscles, some for your intestinal tract. I was like, okay. So I literally had like 4 different bottles of magnesium on my counter. I had Quadrimag and I had Trimag, and then I had individual magnesiums. And I'm like, I'm taking all these magnesiums and I'm trying to figure out the dosage, because if I get it wrong, I, you know, end up on the toilet, or, you know, so it was becoming it took me probably about 3 months to figure out how much of each of the magnesiums kind of work for me. Like, how could I divide these up and get the full benefit? Some of the magnesiums that I really liked for me, the L-threonate was the one that actually enhanced my mood the most. I really noticed that when I upped the dosage on that one particular, and that was like, okay, my brain is starting to feel better. Like, my brain is getting sharper. I'm getting calmer. And from that point, we got to work on it. Matt and I decided, hey, well, let's get out of this 5 or 6 bottles of different magnesiums and try and figure this out. Why don't we actually calculate a formula that would provide all the magnesiums that would do that? So we did that about 6 months ago. And the beauty of that is I was able to cut my dosage to 1.5 grams a day. And I feel fantastic. I've actually never felt, I was just sharing this with Matt this morning. That's my co-founder, by the way. And I was like, I can't remember the last time that I felt this good. And I've been combining that with a lot of extra sunshine, which we were talking about earlier. I'm getting out here in the desert in Sonoma about 3 hours a day in the direct sun. And I've been doing that for months. And I've been doing alternate day fasting as another combo. But I have been able to add caffeine back in my life, and I don't get any jitters from coffee. I don't get any neuro things. I don't have that kind of like what I call the caffeine trigger. What are where you're kind of locked in, and if anybody disturbs you, there's like an angry response or a shortened response that you can kind of get to. None of that. And I feel great. And so we ended up producing a product to kind of help people with this particular, this deficiency, because it's so widespread. And of course, Dave Asprey got wind of it. He brought us on his podcast. And the thing is it was so good that we sold out before the podcast. So they had to pull the podcast and do it later. So we were out of it like a bunch of times. It keeps going out the window, and the testimonies we're getting from it. I knew that magnesium was widespread deficient, but where we don't know, and I don't know where this is, to be frank, is what is the optimal level of magnesium? And I have found, for me, I function really well at 1.5 grams of a divided dosage of about 7 different magnesiums that I use. Make me feel awesome. Some people, it might be a little less. Some people, it might be a little more. Everybody has to titrate down to what they feel is right for them. But that's made a massive difference to me, and I'm super grateful and happy.
You're in the company of many physicians, including Dr. Joe Mercola, who both of us know, who feel that we have grossly underestimated not just the recommended daily allowance of magnesium, but because of a lot of the changes that we've made to our lifestyle and environment, and the requirements of our cells in order to like buffer some of the oxidative stress that we're now exposed to, that these magnesium requirements may be in the 1 to, as you mentioned earlier, 3 gram range per day for a lot of people. And the numbers in terms of magnesium deficiency just keep going up. And I think a lot of our listeners can probably resonate with that experience. I mean, you've done something huge here, whether or not you realize it or whether or not a lot of our listeners realize it. You've made the connection that a lot of that caffeine sensitivity is in fact magnesium deficiency. It's an overstressed nervous system, largely because there's not enough magnesium in the body to deal with some of the new stuff that our cells are exposed to these days. What were some of the first changes you experienced? Because I would imagine that you've got like the magnesium glycinate and malate and some of those forms that are a little bit more body related, right? So they're going to help with some of the cramping and stuff that you mentioned. And then what research did you see that had you start integrating the magnesium L-threonate and kind of combining things? Because I haven't seen a product like yours that combines a lot of the body and brain and CNS aspects and benefits of magnesium.
Yeah, well, the bottom line is I went way back to the research of Charles Poliquin, the strength sensei, and God rest his soul, he died an untimely death. But I think he trained gold medalists in 27 different sports. And what had happened was I had actually attended a lecture where he was speaking about his secrets. It was at the Bulletproof Conference lecture, and he was just laying down gold nugget after gold nugget after gold nugget of things that he had used. And one of the things that he illustrated, and he was the first guy to make the link between Chinese medicine and neurotransmitter dominance and the effects of training. And to break that down was nobody had made a connection with Chinese medicine with modern science. And because Charles would learn all these different languages and do research in other countries, which would have a bias, a social or cultural bias on that, he discovered that with different athletes, whether they were dopamine dominant or acetylcholine dominant, were the primary athletes. He said, if you were one of the other athletes, forget it. You just weren't going to be a gold medalist. You were going to be an artist or a creative person. Like, he really noticed that. But with those, the training volume and training frequency and capacity recovery was directly related with the neurotransmitters they were able to release and the calming of the nervous system from, I mean, he's dealing with Olympic athletes, professional athletes, people that are doing freak zone volumes and have freak zone bodies and a freak zone drive. So you've got all of those things that's the magic combo to make a professional athlete or to make a world champion or a gold medalist. And when it's funny, I attended that lecture and I thought it was really cool and thought really interesting. But then when I got myself into the hole, I'm like, okay, where do I go? And I started looking at Charles stuff. And then I saw Mercola's information out there. And then I saw Dr. Sanjay Gupta in the heart world. And he was talking about using magnesium with all his heart patients was more effective than the drugs they were giving. This is a medical doctor who's usually poo-pooing this stuff. He says, I can't deny the effects of this. People are reporting better sleep, better digestion, better health, no heart palpitations. And so I was like, okay, well, there's all these different magnesiums, which magnesiums are for what particular product, everything from insulin resistance to brain function to, muscle contractions, all this stuff. And I was like, holy crap. So I just started researching and then I'd hear about this product. And I say, okay, well, let me buy that one. And let me buy that one and see which one. And just like at any biohacker, I would dose up on one particular product during that day and see what level I started to get the runs or the dosage, because if you go back to orthomolecular nutrition, one of the foundational standards that, Dr. Linus Pauling and Hawkins and Hoffer and those guys had figured out was that when you overtake any supplement, typically you break the GI barrier is what they call it, and you get the runs. That means you cannot tolerate absorption of any mark of that. In their philosophy back then, starting in the 70s, treating like schizophrenia and bipolar to this with nutrition, was
alcohol addiction.
Yeah. They would take people up to that level where they get the runs, and then they would titrate down and hold that dosage. Sometimes they would get the runs again, and they started that with vitamin C, but a lot of people don't realize they went on it. So then I looked into Hoffer's work, who was a guy that was living out in Canada, out on the West Coast, which I'm a Canadian originally. And he had extensive information on treating all kinds of conditions by megadosing on various nutrients. So these guys were the original biohackers, particularly they were using it for medicine or treating conditions, which that's not what we're doing. We're not treating conditions. We're into optimizing performance, optimizing aesthetics, and optimizing health. So basically we're taking relatively healthy people or average people, and we're turning them into what we were genetically designed to be, like our ancestors 2,000 years ago that could run around with 200 pounds of armor, march across the field, fight other people to death, and march back home. There's no professional athlete that can even do that today. And that was just an average soldier in the Roman army or the Spartan army or whatever. So it shows how weak we've become with the advent of technology. Mm-hmm. We've become physically weak. And I do believe that the deficiency in magnesium is one of these things. So I kind of went on that whole route and then gradually started to experiment with each one of those magnesiums, seeing which one that I liked or felt. I would document, what does my body feel like? How's my sleep? All those type of things until we kind of came up with the magic amount.
Yeah, so the sleep component, I think, is of a lot of interest to many people, and you track and quantify, your deep sleep and REM sleep, and you're paying attention to all of those things. On the sleep side, what changes did you observe when you got your magnesium levels dialed in?
Yeah, well, keep in mind, I was in a very stressful time when this started. So one of the things that I was having is I was having anxiety when I would go to sleep, and the brain won't shut down. You know how that you're sitting there and you're trying to figure this situation out, or you're waking or when you're waking up in the morning, you instantly go to that same thing that you left with, and you're waking up tired. And keep in mind, I have never felt anxious in my life. I never had problems sleeping well. I'm one of these lucky guys that didn't have issues sleeping. And all of a sudden I had issues sleeping, and I was in these kind of what I call these feedback loops that I couldn't seem to get out of. And so that was the first thing. So the one of the early things that started to happen is I started to sleep better. Now, initially I attribute that to cutting the caffeine, which I think helped. I want to be clarifying, because I think, I have what I call the bucket theory of nutrition, and I'll explain that is. So the bucket theory of nutrition is like, okay, your optimal level would be like a full bucket, and your lifestyle, how you're living, is like a hole in the bucket. And that water, that nutrient, is flowing out of the bucket at a rate based on the lifestyle choices that you make. Now, unfortunately, almost no one has a full bucket of nutrients in anything. So the philosophy that I've adopted as a biohacker is, let's go and target a specific nutrient or a specific component of my nutrition that I want to get addressed, usually based on testing, like, doing the SpectraCell test is like, okay, I've identified this is an empty bucket. Rather than just doing the recommended dose or the suggested dose, I want to take that up to the maximum dose for a period of time until I fill up my bucket. Once I fill up my bucket, I can titrate down to a maintenance dose, which is relative to my burn rate. And when I increase that burn rate, I generally can take more of that. And when I decrease that burn rate, I can deplete that. I don't need as much of that nutrient. So that's the overarching strategy that I incorporated. So number one, I was started to cut down the things that were keeping my burn rate up, because I knew I was burning more than I was using. I was in a deficient, and I was losing more as I went. That was established. That was the next thing. And then I started increasing up the dosage of magnesium and experience with magnesiums to fill up that bucket till eventually I could get to a point, which I did about 3 or 4 months ago, where I was able to come down in the dosage to what I call my maintenance dosage.
Nice. And so you found that the optimal dose for you kind of dialed that in by doing, you said 500 milligrams 3 times a day. Was that with food?
I did both. So I did with food and without food. I do find, for the most part, it does work better with food. There's less likelihood of getting digestive discomfort or disease or disaster pants, as some people would like to call it. Because usually now, if I was to take a high dosage, I wouldn't actually get, but then there's certain magnesiums, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but you get that kind of gurgly feeling on magnesium in your stomach. Like everything feels kind of loose and the stools get really loose at first. And if you go over it, well, you're just sitting on, you're going back and forth to the toilet for the next 8 hours or whatever. Right. So
but turns into a faucet.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. And so it's interesting, because this is a process leveraging a lot of the work of Nobel Prize winner Linus Pauling and some of these physicians, founders of orthomolecular medicine. We use that same process in optimizing magnesium. And what I've found personally, I feel best usually in that 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams per day with food. A lot of times I'm doing it with lunch and dinner to kind of break it up. And we found a lot of our clients feel the same way. From your experience, you tested a lot of different things. What forms of magnesium made it into the formulation, and why? I was kind of going over some of the research before we jumped on, just to see what studies had come out recently. There's a pretty exciting one showing that your risk of liver cancer is inversely, is a 2020 study. Your risk of liver cancer is inversely related to your dietary magnesium and your supplemental magnesium, right? Mm-hmm. So what were the final forms that you kind of honed in on, and and why. And for you guys listening that want to check this out, you can go to magbreakthrough.com. You guys have some of the science there and some of the formulation so that people could kind of dig into that. magbreakthrough.com/biohacks. And we've set up a discount. I just wanted to mention that early in the conversation, and we'll mention it again at the end.
Yeah, so I'm going to go through these because, and for your listeners, if you can get out a pen and paper, you want to make some notes, because there may be an argument to kind of focus on one of these depending if you have any particular conditions or there's an area that you want to work on specifically. So we did 7 different magnesiums that we kind of made the grade. I think there's about 30 different ones out there in total, but these are the ones that the research seemed to support the most, that allowed us to kind of come on that formulation, as well as also adjusting for dietary components. Keep in mind, Matt, my business partner, is a keto guy. So we're at polar ends of the spectrum as far as our dietary components. But we try to find the middle ground, and we see that as an advantage because we don't want to be caught in a dietary bias that can be very limiting. And of course, you drill down in genetics and nutrigenomics. That's why they hire people like you to figure out the details to really, I mean, if you really want to be a biohacker, you definitely have to have your kind of coaching involved to kind of really optimize what's going on. So chelate was the one. Funny you should bring that up. This one is one of the components of magnesium that's known to regulate melatonin. Regulates like sleep and wake cycles in your body. So basically it quiets the nervous system. That's essentially what it does.
Which form, Wade?
That's the chelate. Okay. Magnesium chelate. Now then you have magnesium citrate. So for example, when you go for a colonoscopy, they're going to use magnesium citrate in a high dosage usually with some sort of drug to flush the intestinal tract out. So the one thing that I would say that a lot of companies use a lot of citrate. We only use a very little bit, because what it does do is draws a lot of water in and can be helpful for a laxative effect. So if you're suffering from laxative effects, definitely citrate. You want to lean a little bit more on that side. That's the kind of magnesium that you'll benefit from. If
someone's dealing with like constipation, they tend to not have as frequent bowel movements as they would like.
Yes.
Okay. Fantastic.
Now magnesium, bisglycinate or some bisglycinate, depending on how you want to pronounce it. This is probably one of the most universally applicable magnesiums, and I think it's something that is an absolute must in our dietary components. It's hard to get from our food. High blood pressure in heart disease, there's nothing better than decreasing blood pressure than magnesium. Type 2 diabetes, that's another one, because the bisglycinate has been shown to assist with the breakdown of sugars and might decrease insulin resistance. That's what they're seeming to show, your insulin levels. And by the way, when I did do my HOMO IR after supplementing with magnesium, which is your relation between blood glucose and insulin, so it shows both of those. Even though I'm essentially a carbivore as a vegetarian, my Dr. Paul Maximus, who does all my testing for me back in Vancouver, he's like, dude, you look like you're on a ketogenic diet. Your blood sugar response and your blood insulin levels. And I do feel that, magnesium was a contributing factor. I think do well on carbs compared to most people. So we have to put a caveat in there genetically. Also, bisglycinate is really good for osteoporosis. So reducing the risk of bone fractures. So particularly as we age, that is a very big issue. And here was something that was really interesting as well. Bisglycinate was also good for migraines. There was research that studied that, people who suffer from migraines, they get oftentimes a constriction of the arterioles going into the brain, and that cuts off oxygen, which causes magnesium. And magnesium be able to do that. Then there's, of course, the manufacturing of serotonin. So that's when you don't have, serotonin is kind of like, I call it the happy hormone or the happy neurotransmitter, feeling connected, feeling put in. And the interesting thing is when you have insufficient levels of magnesium, your serotonin levels go down. And the other thing is, here's the crazy part. People who are on antidepressants start to really exhaust their magnesium levels. And I believe one of the reasons that they start switching people from antidepressant to switching off is because they end up getting depletion of these key minerals like magnesium. And now that drug doesn't become responsive because they exhaust that pathway. And so
that's huge and very interesting. And I would say anyone listening to this that is either on antidepressants or dealing with low mood, anxiety, whatever vernacular you prefer, optimizing your magnesium levels is one of the first things you want to do. And then if you're on medication, there are tests like Genomind, Genomind, where you can see your genetic susceptibilities and which types of medication you might respond best to. For some people, that may be a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. For other people, that may be a selective norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor. And everyone is a little bit different, but we now have this data. We have this information. We've seen the connection with magnesium. We've seen that if you're a little bit more precise with your genetics, you can have a much better experience and a much higher quality of life. We're kind of moving to this age where it's not survival of the fittest anymore. It's survival of the wisest. It's survival of those who are able to adapt quickly. And that's part of the reason that I love the role of magnesium in all of this, in facilitating that.
100%. And what's interesting is when you're subjected to increased electrical by high-powered wires, signals from our cell phones and all these electronics that we are all in front of computers all day long. What's interesting is our magnesium burn rate, going back to that hole in the bucket theory, starts to exhaust at a higher rate. So Darwin is interesting enough. You said that in your last part of it, the most adaptable. Darwin is one of the most misquoted people ever. He never said it was survival of the fittest. He said it was survival of the most adaptable, which somehow became the fittest because that became a kind of a chest pumping, hey, we're Spartans, we're going to will victory. But what does that mean? Well, the world that we live in as humans today has altered radically. I like the radicalization. I like the idea that we can talk on a telephone and Skype and video. I love that we could fly in airplanes. I love that we have Wi-Fi. I'm not against technology by any standpoint. I think we're learning to balance technology. And as biohackers, we're learning okay, well, how do we allow our human biology, how do we optimize that so that it can manage that adaptation to the current world as it is and my lifestyle choices as it is? Because guess what? We're not living on the farm like grandma and grandpa. We're being subjected to millions of more frequencies and electrical stuff and toxins and stuff like that than any other time in history. Our responsibility is to be aware of the current environment. We're not going backwards. We can't fight the environment. And that's why I said, staying alive in a toxic world was all about, hey, look, I can't change the world. I can change and increase my ability to adapt to it. So yeah, depression and that I think is something for people to check out and get into and really look at. And for those people who are looking at mental health, really dive into Abraham Hoffer's work. I think he was on the bleeding edge of it. He also founded an institution called Orthomolecular Psychiatry. And it's a phenomenal thing. If you can find somebody in your local area that has some expertise that can give the test. I'm not an expert on that. I'm just kind of leading the way of where we got some of this info. Next on the magnesium list was magnesium malate. And of course that goes back to, right, our bread and butter where we started in Biooptimizers, which is magnesium is a key mineral in order to make your enzymes function at an optimal level. So pounding a lot of enzymes in your body certainly will aid in a lot of things, but if you pound enzymes with magnesium, you get an even better response. And so there's over 300 enzyme responses that are dependent on the amount of magnesium. Now, particularly people with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, or high levels of aluminum, malate seems to have very positive effects on that.
Very interesting. I had not heard that about aluminum, and that is a growing challenge. More and more people when they test for it, are testing high for aluminum. And, you have silica as an option. I did not know that there was also silica as an option. I should finish explaining myself for the chelation of aluminum, but it's something that's tough to get out of the body. And you're saying you've seen research that magnesium malate can also support the removal of aluminum from our brain and tissues.
Absolutely. So it's really, really fascinating, some of these things. And you can start, start looking at, you can put in magnesium malate and aluminum in Google searches, and you'll start finding this, or in PubMed and these type of things. So for people who want to dive into the research, then which might be my favorite magnesium personally, this is the one I like the best, is magnesium L-threonate. So threonate is probably the most absorbable magnesium there is. Couple things that I like it for: improved memory and overall cognitive function, as well as sleep enhancements. One of the things that I found when I was getting extraordinarily stressed is I have a very good memory. I just naturally I've been very fortunate in that way. I can remember things from when I was a little child, and I can remember events, just vivid recall. And I started to forget a lot of different things. I couldn't recall things in the past. My short-term memory was really shot, and my long-term memory wasn't as clear and precise as it was. So one of the things that I found, of course, 3 grams of lion's mane a day is absolutely critical. I haven't seen anybody that has an improved memory and cognitive function on 3 grams of lion's mane per day. I get mine from a company called Real Mushrooms, which you want to have high lignans in the mushroom. So that's kind of a segue, but since we're dealing with the brain, and Matt and myself and our executive team, we do a lot of brain training. So we've been to Biohacking, we've been to 40 years of Zen. We really like to push our brains to the extent. And one of the things that we found was L-threonate was a way we could calm the nervous system and go longer and harder in our spider cap sessions, where they're increasing neural connectivity and working dormant aspects of the brain. So magnesium threonate is probably the best thing that happens. So I stack that with 3 grams of lion's mane a day, and my memory came back better than ever before, and my mental endurance really went up significantly. And of course, shout out to all those people who are thinking about going to 40 years of Zen. Definitely go do it. It's probably one of the biggest game changers ever as far as functioning. But be sure that you're really ramping up your supplementation when you go, so that you can push yourself and get the most gains out of that thing. It's like the tech is one thing, but your ability to go hard without blowing out the nervous system is the next thing. So for all you hackers out there, that's a great tip that I think people will really, really love. And we love it. I love threonate. It's like I said, it's my personal favorite magnesium.
This is fantastic. I mean, you're giving us you're dropping some biohacking bombs. So we're talking about mag-threonate that has the ability to kind of cross the blood-brain barrier, get into the central nervous system, unlike some of these other forms. And you combined that with 3 grams of lion's mane from real mushrooms. You talked about high lignans and that being an important part of whatever formulation you use. But I'd like to know, how do you do the mushrooms along with this? And then I'm also curious on your opinion between Biocybernaut, Peak Brain Institute, and 40 Years of Zen, because I've been looking into neurofeedback as well and talked to all 3 of those groups, and I'm kind of deciding. So I would love you to work through those 10 consecutive questions.
Sure thing, no problem. So I would say that first and foremost, we'll finish off the lion's mane conversation and the threonate for mental and cognitive enhancement. So, I mean, I'm pretty brutal in how I do things. I would just take a scoop of the mushrooms. I would literally take a teaspoon and dig it out of the bag, put it in my mouth first thing in the morning, and wash it down with some water.
Savage.
It's like, I don't got time to just mess around.
I mean, aside from choking it down with, or chasing it with some apple cider vinegar, that's pretty hardcore.
Hardcore. Yeah. I just take it, eat it. Like, as a biohacker, one of the things that I do like to take things is I like to take them as their raw elements. I want to actually feel the taste, the texture. What are the things? Because I've noticed, for example, a lot of the cognitive enhancers, almost anything that's in the cognitive enhancing thing, it's got a kind of a crappy taste. And the crappier the taste, the better it seems to work. And I don't know why that is, but it just is, you know, it doesn't really, you know, it's just an odd idea. So I took that, I would take that first thing in the morning when I got up. My girlfriend at the time, she was like, okay, we need a better solution for this. So she would mix it up with a little bit of like cocoa, and so put some herbs and make it like this really nice drink that I would never take the time to make. But it was awesome. It was awesome when she started doing it for me, because she wanted to improve her memory, and she was able to do that as well using that combination. And then with the 3 and 8, I was taking a gram per day straight 3 and 8. So 1 full gram a day of that over and above the other magnesium. So out of the 3 grams I was taking 1 gram of 3 and 8.
And were you doing that with lunch and dinner, divided dosages? What did you find to work?
Well, I did a couple of experiments. I did it 1 gram all of the time, and it was the only magnesium where I didn't get the runs when I took it in high dosage. Mm-hmm. Only one. So I went right up to 3 grams on that with absolutely no fallout. And I went on even beyond it. I went to 5 grams for a little bit as an experiment. Didn't have the problem with the 3 and 8. Every other magnesium, I would get a certain amount of runs when I took it up to 5 grams. I never did anything over 5 grams, just so people are wondering, because I would usually run into gastrointestinals on the individuals, just right. So people want to know on that. So we kind of,
I mean, it's good for them to know that these things are comparatively relatively safe compounds. You know, the worst thing that happens is you spend a little bit more time on the toilet.
Yeah. And comparatively, if I did if I was at 1.5 grams of citrate, I'm on the toilet. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at a 3-4 times different, just in my personal physiology. I mean, it's going to vary person to person, but these are some generalizations that people can kind of go off of if they want to do their own experimentation.
Absolutely.
But, and then we have magnesium taurate, which is also, interesting enough, may affect taurine, which is a nootropic compound. This one is all overall cognitive function. And it works particularly like GABA. So if you do a Braverman test, mm-hmm. and forget, there's a lot of sideways stuff with Braverman right now that we heard of, but his test is great online. So you go online, you take the Braverman test, and basically you can only do it once because you'll want to cheat. You answer those questions, it'll give you a particular neurotransmitter dominance. And interesting enough, the relation between magnesium taurate, taurine, and the functioning of GABA seems to be able to increase brain-derived neurotropic factors, BDNF. So
sorry about that. So for some reason, the audio cut out.
Okay.
Right. It says internet connection is unstable. I'm hardwired.
Wonder if it's mine. I might be getting some problem.
Let me pull on this and see if I could change it. It seems like it's back now and good. I heard everything up until the Braverman test. We were talking about that. Then you said things have gone a little bit sideways with him recently.
Yes.
So we'll kind of pick it up from there, and then I'll have James edit it out.
Sure. So when you go on, if you're looking at what's your neurotransmitter dominance, you can take what's called the Braverman test online. And you know, I know he's got some issues going on legally, but the test is amazing. And you do it once. You'll cheat if you do it more than once. So you got to do it the once and be honest, give your honest answers on that, not what you want to give or what you think. If you really do that, be in a good state before you go on it. And it'll show which neurotransmitter that you're dominant from. And that's that's another neuro hack why there's such a variance with the different neurotransmitter or nootropic enhancers with person, because each person's brain chemistry is going to be different. But what's interesting about taurate, it helps build taurine, which acts similarly to GABA. So there's kind of like a pathway of production. And what that does is that increases BDNF, which is brain-derived neurotrophic factors. And that is the thing that you get from fasting. This is the thing that basically what it does is it helps your impulses between the brain. So if you're overreacting and you're getting spun out from like too much, that too much caffeine, too much speedy zone, and you're like, what happens? GABA is the blocker, the neurotransmitter that starts to slow that down and clean up that connection, if you will. And so people who are spun out seem to do well on that. Also migraines, which interesting, seem to be correlated. So a lot of people that get spun out on those things also have migraines and eventually lead to Heart disease. Well, guess what? Taurate has been shown to help lower blood pressure and protect against irregular heartbeats. So when we see a lot of these anxiety-based challenges that are happening to people, oftentimes they're correlated. And interesting enough, another part was that taurate is good for PMS. So for a lot of women who are suffering from cramping or really getting irritability, bloating, and depression, oftentimes that's because of magnesium. They're losing the magnesium in their cycle, and it's exacerbating. That burn rate again goes, the bucket opens up, if you will, and that component every month is sucking on the system. And it's also one of the reasons I believe that a lot of women crave chocolate because I always say, anytime there's a food craving, somewhere underneath there, your body is trying to self-regulate. As opposed to looking at cravings as some horrible thing where you're a weak person. Look at, okay, my body is looking for a particular nutrient. I'm getting this for a particular reason. And the other thing is this particular magnesium taurate is good for, also been shown for helping with people with insulin resistance. So again, that's a big one. And then finally, the last one is looking at magnesium orotate. Okay, so this is the one, I call it the athlete. This is really good. What it does is it can reduce the calcification inside the muscle and heart tissue and tissues inside the body. So it can help improve flexibility. Also, this is what kind of gives people that kind of healthy athletic glow. Also heart arrhythmias. So you look at a lot of endurance athletes that died of heart attacks, and you've heard about them, and hockey players and, endurance runners and all these people that do this. Oftentimes I think it was an excessive magnesium component that was causing the irregular heartbeat. They were sweating at a high levels. They were depleting their systems. Maybe they lived in an environment or their genetics didn't take up magnesium that well. Oftentimes those are connected to that. Also the immune system, bone integrity, and again, blood glucose levels. So as well, all of these are going to help calcium absorption. So again, making the balance, because calcium is about a 2-to-1 ratio. And what happens is we have a very high level of calcium intake in our North American diets, which blows out the ratio. So we start dumping both the calcium, like we're trying to balance this out. So it creates a problem there. And magnesium is actually the control for calcium uptake in the body. Then, so those are things. And then a couple things that will enhance your delivery of magnesium would be using a fulvic acid monatomic blend, and vitamin B6 will help deliver that into the system a lot better. So those are two agents that seem to enhance the absorption and utilization of magnesium. And so after literally, I think it was about 14 months of going down this rabbit and going through all the stuff, and Matt did on his side, we were able to come up with a formula that balanced those 7 magnesiums we talked about, put them in the right orders, added the B6 and the fulvic acid delivery system, and that's where we came up with Magnesium Breakthrough.
I love it. All right. So Magnesium Breakthrough, you guys that want to check it out, magbreakthrough.com/biohacks. We've set up a discount there. Wade, the magnesium, the formulation, all that's phenomenal. I want to do like a little bit of an example for our listeners, because I'm excited about this, because I'm not currently utilizing lion's mane. It's something I've taken in the past, but probably like you and many of our listeners, you take some stuff and then they don't necessarily stay. It's no reflection on the compound, but there's a lot of exciting things to potentially integrate. Same thing with humic and fulvic acids. I'm currently taking a little bit of Shilajit for mitochondrial health with my CoQ10, because we've seen that enhance utilization and absorption, but it's not really, the humic and fulvic acids are not something that's part of the routine. So let's say hypothetically, I've got your magnesium formulation. I've got the lion's mane from real mushrooms, and then whatever humic and fulvic compound you believe is the best. And I want to really I want to go from where I'm at to, let's say, elite cognitive performance, relative elite cognitive performance. What's the protocol? What's the process for a 200-pound male?
Okay, great stuff. Because we're right in the wheelhouse. Because that's what I am. I got on the scales yesterday and it was 194 pounds.
There we go.
I'm right there. 3 grams seems to be the magic dose of lion's mane, and I want to quantify that for a second. And I would encourage you to bring on Jeff Chilton, who I interviewed on my podcast, and he'd be a great source. He's been in the mushroom industry for over 50 years. He's been growing mushrooms. He's like the original OG. And one of the problems is that a lot of the lion's mane, or all the mushroom compounds, they add filler to them. So almost all the American manufactured companies are adding filler into their products. Even some of the big names, the well-respected names. I'm not going to go accusing things, but if you break this down. And so I also met Jeff a number of years ago at one of the hacking conferences, and he was actually able to demonstrate with me. And so what I did is I did an actual test. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do 3 grams of, this name brand and 3 grams of his. And I can tell you there was no comparison. The taste was, again, going back to that taste, the taste was significantly stronger when I had the mega lignans. That's what is the active compound that increases that neural connectivity inside your brain. I don't know. I don't think, and Jeff echoed this, that there doesn't seem to be any benefit over 5 grams, it just doesn't seem to be. I never actually even got up to 5 grams. I just noticed such an improvement almost instantly. Like within a week, I was noticeably being able to remember the number sequence. Like, you get the number sequence to you when they text something, and so you got to recite 6 numbers. But when I'm my worst part, I couldn't remember I'd have to look at it and type these in, where afterwards I could remember all 6 of those numbers with ease. Right in, so it's like within a week, that was the first thing that I noticed. It's like, wow, that was, it was something I noticed right away. The other thing is with the Shilajit, if you're doing that as a humic fulvic, the straight, that old black pitch that you can do, I just do like the end of a toothpick on it, and just take a little dab of that. I do like the liquid, particularly because we manufacture a liquid fulvic humic with our minerals and vitamins as well as a delivery.
Right. I used that for years. That's a great formula. All right. I forgot about that.
Primergen M and Primergen V, which covers all your micronutrient, all your trace minerals, as well as the platinum group elements. You can add a little bit, and you can kind of go variants. I have a secret stash. This is a secret biohacking stash that Matt and I use, is monoatomic gold. I think that's a very underestimated element. You can get it in a powder form. I carry it in little bottles, except when I travel, because it looks almost like a cocaine snuffer. So I don't want to cause any problems going, it's like you'll see Matt and I dumping this little powder on our fingers. It's monoatomic gold that we're adding. Just like gold connectors in your speakers that make a better sound, there seems to be a significant enhancement with gold, monoatomic gold.
I've never heard of, this is my first time hearing about monoatomic gold.
Well, if you go way, way, way back in the day to David Wolf, he used to talk about monoatomic gold, and this was used in ancient Egypt, and that's what they found in the pyramids, and this was a thing that, this powdered gold that people did. I thought it was all hocus pocus, but when we hook ourselves up to neurofeedback machines, and we would take that versus not taking that, we would see an increase of electrical connectivity in the various parts of our brain. So there you have it.
What's the brand on that you use, and what's the dosage on that?
I can't reveal the brand at the moment, but because I've been sworn to secrecy by the manufacturer. So
okay.
So sorry about that one. Hopefully one day we'll be able to reveal it, but right now I can't, but to secure my source.
I gotcha. All right.
I frankly don't know of a commercially viable one. I'm not saying there's not out there, but I got wind of this from one of our formulators, and he said, okay, here's my secret stash. And
Perfect.
For me, it's not going to be a commercial product anyways. I think it's so out there in the biohacking world that it probably doesn't make any commercial sense, but if you can find a source, it's a great idea.
And you've probably done a phenomenal job at piquing interest in the listeners. Is for someone that would want to find it, is monoatomic gold the same as, I think I've heard David Wolf call it like Ormus gold
Ormus gold, these
Ormus
types of
gold,
things, which is supposedly orbitally rearrange molecules that's changed. So I don't know all about that, to be frank, and I don't know where the science ends and the marketing begins. Right. But I do know that a little bit of monatomic gold, you don't need very much, does seem to enhance the function, whether it's an actual or it's some sort of psychosomatic effect. I don't know, but that's what it lights up for us. So those three are the big ones. And then of course, you can, and this is going to be a very individual thing, is if you want to push the envelope. So when we're in biohacking training, we'll go after, their racetams, and some people respond to piracetam and aniracetam and those things as in dosages where basically take a half teaspoon and slam that back with some water. Again, I go for that goopy taste. Those things really, really significant. Some people, I know my business partner really likes it. I don't seem to have as positive effect. So we have a little bit in different neurochemistry. He does like the nicotine components. So he likes doing nicotine. Yeah.
I'm chewing 4 milligrams right now.
Yeah. So those ones definitely, for some people that works really well. What I'm concerned about with nicotine is what is the long-term constriction components. And one of my friends is Dr. Horst Filter, who was the first cardiovascular surgeon to put the stent in the body, said his concern, because I said, what about nicotine as a nootropic? He said, I'm not so sure about the long-term, because in his history, he found that anyone that was on nicotine got vasoconstriction. However, I want to caveat that I don't know if that was just correlated with cigarette smoking.
That was my next question.
Or if it was, I don't know the difference. But for me, occasionally we'll go hang out, and when I'm down to see Matt in Panama, and we get out the hookah and smoke. We smoke the hookahs down there where it has the nicotine and stuff. It's a nice buzz. But but the problem with it for me is I, like, once I get one of those pipes out, like I just want to smoke one of those for like hours, and then I'm just kind of locked in like this bug-eyed kind of zone, right? So I don't seem to have a limiter on that, so I tend to stay away with it personally, but some people do really well on it and like it. I know Dave Asprey is a big advocate for it. Matt, my business partner, really likes it. For me, that's not quite right, but some people will try it and say.
Are those guys doing it with like the 2 milligram or 4 milligram nicotine gum?
Well, no. So if you're from Canada, there's another hack that you can use. And so that hack is you get the nicotine inhalers, the quit smoking nicotine things that you can get. You don't need a prescription. You can buy them at a drugstore in Canada. So it's like a little inhaler, which you take an inhale of it. And it's a pretty significant shot of nicotine when you take that smack. Like it's on. Wow. So a lot of people in the hacking community, I know Dave does it, Matt does it, like they'll use that, they'll get ready for a podcast or a focus moment, and they'll take a shot of that nicotine. And I've tried it. It's a little harsh for me, like I said, but again, I think I might have a bigger sensitivity than maybe some other people. So but there's no doubt about it. It works. And I will say one caveat: if you're hanging out with Paul Chek and you do his Native American organic nicotine that he gets from his sources, and you do it in the vaporizer, and he usually stacks it with a bunch of other herbs, that's gold. That is probably the quickest switch to go into total relaxed, calm mental focus that I've ever seen. His stack is amazing. So kudos to Paul on that one, for a little shout out for him. If you get the chance to go down there and share that with him, and it's pretty awesome.
That's fantastic. And like, before we kind of bring it around to dosing of the mag, just to kind of echo a little bit of, I didn't even know that the nicotine inhalers existed, I'm gonna be checking that out for sure. I've been a little bit of a gum guy, and I mean, we work with a number of guys, a number of Olympians in the hockey world, and those guys love their snus. And it's especially the Canadian hockey guys. I went out with Carrie and I went out with a few of them back in January when they were in town, and we were just having a little bit of a conversation and fun night out. One of them gave me one of these snus things that's like 18 to 20 milligrams of nicotine in it, and I'd never gone more than 2 milligrams or 4 milligrams with a little bit of gum, and it rocked my world. I had to throw it out within seconds. So it seems like there's certainly with nicotine, there's research showing 7 milligrams of nicotine patch is helpful against neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's. But if it's something that you're not used to, or it doesn't jive with your neurochemistry, either avoid it or start really, really small and dose up.
Well, that's the thing with nicotine. It's the only drug that I know of that increases receptors the more you take it, which is totally the opposite of any component. And in South American native traditions and spiritual communities, they use nicotine as a healing agent. Keep in mind, if you are using nicotine, that's not smoking cigarettes or doing that stuff. You want to get well-grown, well-curated nicotine supplementation that you're going to use inside of that. So I do believe for a lot of people, particularly if they have trouble with mental focus or high level of motor skills, like hockey players and baseball players and these things, which are very, very high motor skills, there definitely seems to be a laser-like focus that comes from nicotine, particularly to the dopamine dominant type personalities on the braver men. Say, I'm more acetylcholine than dopamine. I'm very, very close. I'm almost dual. Like it's so close, it's unbelievable. But I would switch more to acetylcholine, where Matt's a little bit more dopamine. And I think that's where those guys and a lot of athletes or a lot of high performers are dopamine dominant, right? And then I think nicotine's probably really well for those guys.
Yeah, for sure. I'm my dominant deficiency from the Braverman test was GABA, which is probably part of the reason that I respond so well to the magnesium formulation.
Yeah.
And I take a little bit of GABA every day. And I mean, I remember even back in the bodybuilding days, the first time I tried Phenibut, which is like a derivative of GABA, I was like, This is the greatest thing I've ever tried, Okay,
I drink tea. I drink Gaba Tea. You can drink Gaba Tea. There's a little place in Vancouver called O5 Tea, and you can get their GABA. So if you're a GABA dominant guy, you can drink the tea. You get this really nice tea, and I used to sit up there and drink that, and it's just a real nice feeling that you get after about the fourth or fifth cup. Those little cups that they have in the the Japanese tea ceremonies.
That sounds wonderful. All right, so we've got the humic and fulvic acids through Primergen, M&V. We've got the lion's mane through real mushrooms. You talked a little bit about the monoatomic gold for the people that want to try to track that down. We talked a little bit about the nicotine, not necessarily your cup of tea, but for some people it is beneficial. And then now, how do we dose me up with what would you recommend for me finding my optimal dose of the magnesium?
Yeah, great. So again, start slow. Start at 1 gram, in a divided dosage. So you can divide that up over 3 times a day.
How many of your tablets is that?
Yeah, so 200. There's 500 milligrams a capsule. That's what you're getting in divided doses. I don't divulge all of the different magnesiums. That's kind of a proprietary component. Yeah. I will say it's pretty high in 3-8. I will dose that because both Matt and I felt that was the one that really jumped up our cognitive health. So if you're using other magnesiums, you would kind of break it down to whatever you need to do. The one thing that you will be careful about, in my opinion, again, is the citrate. That's the one that's most likely to give you the runs. So if you were to lower the dosage on anything, it was that. Then, so let's say you start at 1 gram, you do maybe 1 or 2 caps, do a cap in the morning, cap in the afternoon.
Okay.
And then if you go to 1.5 grams. So you do, that's 2 caps is 500 milligrams. I'm sorry about that. You do 2 caps is 500 milligrams. So you do 2 caps and 2 caps. Then later on, you do 2 and 2 and 2. Go up a half gram and split that dosage over. So you take one first thing in the morning with your morning meal, or if you're not a morning guy, you would take it with your coffee. There's a lot of people that are on that. Then you take one in the a gram or half gram in the afternoon and a half gram in the evening. At that point, if you're bringing it up a half a gram, you would split the dosage between your first one would be, say, 3 caps, your second one would be 3 caps, and your second one would be 2 caps. Mm-hmm. So always try and split the dosage over time, because if you take it all at once, you're never going to get to the high level dosage. You'll get the runs before you'll hit those runs earlier than if you wouldn't. The 3 grams of lion's mane, I haven't found any distinguishing difference between taking it in divided dosages or all at once. I just slam it all at once in the morning. You can play around with it, whatever feels, or maybe you're on intermittent fasting. You want to do it later, go ahead, or you want to do it before. It does seem to kick in relatively quick for me, especially if you're getting the really good stuff. And I know Jeff has awesome stuff. We already built in the monoatomic blend and the fulvic acid and the B6 with the breakthrough. So we throw that in there so it delivers all on its own.
Oh, all right. Nice.
Yeah. The Primergen vitamins and minerals was all of the other things. So 7 drops of each twice a day is good enough. Just put it in your water, put it in your, put it with your cough, put it with anything. It's fine.
So you have monoatomic gold and the additional B6 in the Mag breakthrough formula.
Yeah, we got the whole monoatomic blend, all the platinum group elements inside the breakthrough as well. Because so we know that most of the people in our space, they're already into cognitive health. And they want to get
all right. Well, then my apologies. I wasn't trying to pry earlier for like your supplier. Yeah. I didn't think I was under the impression it was only the various magnesium forms in there. I didn't realize you had some of these cofactors. All right, this is fantastic.
Yeah, and you don't need that much. You don't need that much as well. But that little bit goes a long way in delivering all that nutrient, because these are trace minerals, so they're in microscopic amounts that allow you to get that enhancement.
Beautiful. All right, so this is fantastic. And guys, if you're showing any of these signs of magnesium deficiency, we know from the literature, 80% of people are. Used to be 60, now it's 80. It keeps going up, and I agree with you. I think that there's a lot of different factors ranging from the nutrient content in our food. It's much, much less, but just the changes that we've made to our electromagnetic environment, that increases the burn rate of magnesium. It puts more holes in the bucket, even if your lifestyle is dialed in and you're getting a lot of magnesium from food sources like dark chocolate and avocados and nuts and seeds and, fish, fatty fish, especially. What the other symptoms: stress, anxiety, sleep problems, memory issues, anything else that people might be able to, where it makes sense for them to look into magnesium deficiency and either get a test or make the test, some of the Mag breakthrough to see if they experience a benefit.
I forgot one element to that whole stack to go, and that is floating in magnesium salt baths. That's a magnesium. And one of the calming effects for that to go is a great combination. I know a lot of people like to do a little bit of microdosing of psilocybin if they're doing that as well, if they want to get into creative work. That's again a dosage thing. So 200 micrograms or whatever seems to be something where you don't lose cognitive function or whatever. That would be the top out on that. But stacking that with the lion's mane and a gram of magnesium before you go and chilling out, maybe doing like 1,500 milligrams of CBD in that combination is a wonderful. That combination to chill yourself out. I'm in Venice Beach down by Crash's place. If you go down there on Venice Beach, it's one of the best it's one of the best places to go float. That's where Joe Rogan originally started, and Crash built Joe Rogan. Said it's these giant things. It's got great magnesium. We also do that when we do 40 years of Zen, just so people know. I crank my magnesium component when we're doing 40 years of Zen up to about 5 grams a day.
Wow.
Yeah, we're cooking. So that gives us a lot more mental endurance, a lot more strength, a lot more neural connectivity. We're doing the lion's mane. We're doing all the vitamins. We're doing all the mineral. I mean, we're kind of freaks when we go there. Dave's a freak, and we're pounding an incredible amount of ketones with it. So we do exogenous ketones if you're doing some sort of mental brain training. You got to be a little, the dosage is going to vary, but we do that. I'll get a notes about the brand. I forget it because Matt has the brand and it's away from me, but it comes in these little tin cans. It's absolutely atrocious. Some of the like burnt tires or something, I think is the flavor. It's like cherry they got, which is better than the old stuff, but is this
the HVMN?
It might
stuff,
be
the ketone esters.
Yeah, it's intense.
Yeah,
it's intense, but it works. It works for brain endurance. If you're really got a crank on something, adding a little bit of that into your stack really likes to work. And for sleep, if you need to come down for that, I know that Matt likes a herbal comic called Lavella. You can take a couple capsules of that. It's a lavender based, a really particular type of lavender, and you take that with it, and you just go from the chill zone. So if you're cranking really, really hard, and maybe you're using some pharmaceutical nootropics or those things that a lot of people do, coming back down with those lavenders and the magnesiums in 1,500 milligrams of CBD brings you back into balance, and you're like, okay, I'm better to calm down. So there's two aspects. When you rev the engine for focus, how do you pull that back? Because most people are concerned about how do I dose up, but that's one of the things where I got myself into trouble, because dosing up, not doing the neural recovery. That's what got me into that trouble for people. So coming down is just as important. And then for those things now, I just use those things if I really need it. I got a crank, I got to go to the next level for a particular time. I'll use those tools sparingly. Just as a biohacker.
Yep. I resonate a lot with that. And you and I were talking about it offline, but I have a tendency to really push myself into sympathetic dominance, like chronic fight or flight. And it's obvious that my whole life is better when I take time to really create space for parasympathetic, the meditation, the rest and digest, and not shoveling food in my mouth while I'm sitting in front of the computer and, or any of that stuff. And I like that you guys have found some of these hacks and you're stacking them in a way that is very unique and exciting to me. Someone listening, we've talked about exogenous ketones. We've talked about Lavella for sleep. We've talked about CBD, nicotine, some of the racetams, lion's mane, humic fulvic, of course, your mag breakthrough blend. Let's say someone's on a budget. They can only pick two, maximum three of these, and they're looking to optimize their mental performance, right? And let's kind of make that it's mood and it's brain function. What do you direct them to?
3 grams of lion's mane. Then I would definitely put them on the magnesium breakthrough, and I would put them on monoatomic vitamins and minerals.
Yeah, monoatomic vitamins and minerals. But you have some of those in.
We have but we have the liquid Primergen and Primergen M and Primergen V. One is minerals and one is vitamins.
Okay.
So you're dealing with about 84 different trace minerals. If you're really struggling, and I find when we were doing the early neuroscience feedback, those liquid formulas, I actually work with the formulator who was using that for cognitive enhancement with the original neurofeedback equipment that was done here in Arizona way back into the game 13 years ago. That's how I got turned on to that, because they could actually demonstrate when people would add that to their liquid. It's cheap, it's ineffective. I mean, like the doses that we give, I think there's like 90 servings or in one of these little bottles. They're droppers, they're easy and they're convenient. So right there, that's like $50 for 3 months. You're going to people that are struggling they're going to get a benefit of that. 3 grams of mushrooms, hard to knock that out. And if you're in that anxiety or stress or stress, then you would definitely do magnesium breakthrough. Yeah.
And the Primergen, I honestly love it. And frankly, forgot about it. I probably need to up my magnesium. So I'm going to do that as well. But I do remember using that a lot when you guys first gave it to me with, we've recommended your P3OM and Masszymes for years to people, and all of this stuff. I don't know if you guys have recognized it, but you're essentially creating solutions for this new world we're living in. We know that you know, with the changes in our electromagnetic environment, you get an overgrowth of pathogenic bacteria and, you know, higher biotoxins. It affects our enzymes. You guys have P3OM and Masszymes as a gut reset protocol. We know that it burns through magnesium. You guys have now released Mag Breakthrough. And I don't know if it's a conscious, a conscious intention, or if it's, you know, something that you guys are solving problems for yourselves and people in your tribe, and it just happens to work out that way. But I commend you. You guys are doing a great job in helping us to adapt.
It is in our mission statement. So our mission statement is to end physical suffering and optimize biological health. And we believe that a biologically optimized humans is a balance between aesthetics, performance, and health. And we create a triangle on that. And of course, at different points in your life, you're going to be pushing a different thing. In my case, I was pushing the aesthetics case as a bodybuilder. So I was on the aesthetics performance, but not on the health. And that's when I had my digestive crash, which realized, oh, I thought performance equated health. That was not the truth. Like many of us, I was compromising my health for performance. And typically the arch is you get into working out to look better, then you get addicted to the performance, and then you become a biohacker, and then you kind of get into longevity for health. So I've been around this long enough. I'm getting old enough now that I kind of see all aspects of the triangle, and how do we develop either first in class or best in class formulas based on what's been going on for me in the performance world for over 25 years, and Matt in the same, and what we've seen with our clients, what we've seen with the people that we've coached, and what we've noticed in trends. And we're not here to go after anybody else's business, because all our friends are in this industry. They make great companies and great products. And that's why I recommend and suggest all these different people. And when you have someone with your credentials in here that can help a person stop, you know, just navigate through all of this stuff, because all of this stuff works to some degree, but selecting the particular components that's right for that person at this period of time in a systematic format, you end up saving a lot of money and you get more of an effect. So you're not like a bio amateur. You become a biohacker. So we believe in getting all of these in the optimal quantities and qualities is what creates biologically optimized humans. And that's what we're into as Bioptimizers. That's why our company is called Bioptimizers. And so we believe in optimization. There are no shortcuts to greatness. Every shortcut has a consequence. So yeah, you can take drugs, but that's going to exhaust things. And there may be a place for that in your life, but how do you support the burn rate, going back to that bucket theory? And we're always thinking in that level. And of course, that's how we've made our company. And it's why we've been around for 16 years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you guys do a phenomenal job. And as you said, there is no such thing as a biological free lunch. You know, eventually we got to pay the piper, whether it's a week from now, a year from now, or a decade from now. And if you want to have longevity in this game of business, the game of life, you have to respect and honor the yin and the yang, the ebb and the flow, the sympathetic and parasympathetic. And you've inspired me. I need to get back to, you know, I had done for a long time just the mag glycinate and L-threonate, you know, in the past few years when that came forward. And I like that your formulation makes it easy. And the less bottles that I need to open in order to stay optimized, the easier it is. So I'm inspired. I'm going to get the Primer Gin M back in. I'm going to get the Mag Breakthrough back in, and I'm going to get the Lion's Mane in there really at that dosage for the first time ever. And
you're going to love it. You're going to love it.
I'm
Talk to Jeff. Talk to Jeff.
I'd love to. I'm going to invite him on the show. And guys, you know, one more mention before Wade lets us know where you can kind of keep up with him and the other things he's working on. If you want to save some money and optimize your magnesium levels for cognitive health, for mood, and for sleep, along with, you know, 350 or so other biological and enzymatic processes, go to magbreakthrough.com, magbreakthrough.com/biohacks. You'll save some dough. Wade, this has been amazing. Where can listeners stay up to date with things you're working on and, you know, all the cool things happening in your world?
Yeah, so they just kind of get us on the Bioptimizers website. We've got the Awesome Health podcast. We've got the Instagram and the blog, and, you know, everything that you want to go through. That's the place to go. We do have a 12-week course, which is the foundational components of everything that we do, which is the awesome system. There's 7 different pillars. I work on air, water, exercise, sunlight, optimizers, mental beliefs, and attitude, education, testing, and coaching. So everything goes into that framework, and it's not about promoting supplements in that course. The course is look, you can't supplement your way out of bad lifestyle, bad diet, all that stuff. So here's the foundational components that allows for cellular health. We give that away for free to help educate people of like, okay, I have a limited budget. I don't know what I can spend on. Where is the things I'm going to get the most bang for my buck? And as you optimize yourself, your capacity to earn income increases. And I think that's why biohacking is becoming so powerful now, because people realize to compete in today's world with the best of the best of the best, whether you're in New York City on a stock exchange, whether you're in Hollywood as an executive, where you're in San Francisco in the tech world, where or you're in an athletic situation, the best of the best are all doing this stuff. And you're kidding yourself if you think you're going to compete on a world level not doing it. So my pitch is out there. One of the other caveats is with all our products, every time that you try something, if it doesn't blow you away better than anything else that you've ever tried in that particular category, send the bottles back. We give you all your money back. There's no risk, no muss, no fuss, 365 days you have to try it. And if you don't love it, because the bottom line is there's nothing more expensive than a product that doesn't work. We have an incredibly low refund rate. It's like, it's in the minuscule levels, but ultimately we want to make sure it's a customer service experience. And if we can't help you, we want to make sure that you don't turn off the industry, that you find the people that's going to help you. And that's why I'm so grateful to be here.
Beautiful. Well, I'm grateful to have you, my man. And I'm excited for the next time we get to hang out, like we did in Helsinki. Always a pleasure having you on the show. Appreciate you guys so much, and hope to have you on again soon.
Thanks so much, dude. Take care.
Bye-bye. Great job, bro.